Welcome to the tactical preview of Man City versus Bournemouth. In this series, what I try to do is predict Manchester City's starting 11, provide some insight into the opponent, how that might inform how the match will go, and how that might inform City's squad building. Bournemouth have been absolutely fantastic so far this season. They've lost one game in the league all season, and that was at Anfield. They've played Liverpool, Spurs, Brighton, Newcastle, a lot of very good opponents, and yet they've only lost one game. Despite losing a large contingent of their defensive unit to some elite clubs, they have still been fantastic. Guardiola deserves massive credit, and there is a reason why they are so high in the table. This is going to be a really tough challenge for City, I would expect. Thankfully, it is at least at City rather than at Bournemouth. So how have Bournemouth been playing this season? Well, it's mirrored a lot of what they did last season, actually, and that has been this tendency to deploy a ridiculously effective, efficient, and intense press. This season, they lead the way in respect of passes per defensive action. They lead the way in respect of high turnovers. They lead the way in respect of shots following a high turnover also. So essentially, what we have seen so far this season is this ridiculously effective pressing unit. Here is one such example from their recent Premier League game against Nottingham Forest, which of course they won. So here, I believe this is Tavernier trying to attack Forest box. He's surrounded here by Forest players. They do really well to dispossess him, so he falls over. But immediately Tavernier, back up to his feet, wanting to charge down the opponent, disgusted that he has dared claim the ball from him. And that is really a perfect analogy for Bournemouth's press this season, the suffocation that they have done, pinning in their opponents so they can win the ball back high up the pitch and force their opponents into errors, or force them into just hoofing out of play so they can regain that possession. So Tavernier charges, dives in, doesn't quite work, but you still see the level of intensity there. It causes chaos and concern for the player on the ball. But then look at the rest of the team. So even though that hasn't quite worked out, Forest tries to play it out there. This player here is actually blocking off that passing lane superbly well. Bournemouth's midfield is pushed up super high. Also, Forest is still determined here to try to play out from the back rather than just punting it out to try and then ultimately losing it. So they end up going backwards because of that really good way of cutting out those passing lanes. And eventually Bournemouth get into this situation where the Forest players are just horrendously penned into a corner. It's only a matter of time before Bournemouth are able to win the ball back. So that's one example of many across this season. And let me know in the comments, shall I try to incorporate a couple of screenshots into my tactical previews? I already do that for the post-match analysis, but would you like to also see it in the tactical preview? Just a few, do let me know. So that's the sort of team that we are dealing with out of possession, one that wants to win the ball back as soon as possible, hence having the best or one of the best stats for passes per defensive action so far in the Premier League, and that's echoed and mirrored from last season. The way they build up is also going to cause City some concerns, I believe. As Aston Villa did, they do not mind, building up with a 4-2 at times. Quite often that will go through their left side, through Truffert and Semenyo and Senesi. They are also able to do it from the right side, but it's more so the left side where City should be worrying about that build-up situation. They also don't have a problem with just going incredibly direct, and that's something to note as well, that Bournemouth are based on the data, are one of, if not the most direct sides in the Premier League. But they aren't direct in the sense of just your stereotypical Tony Pulis, Sean Dyche, hoof it upfield, that sort of direct ball to a big number 9. It's more so attacking the areas in behind the fullbacks. So here and here, this is where they ping balls, often from their centre-backs, into the path of their widest players. And the biggest concern for City is going to be Semenyo, because Bournemouth tends to, I'm not going to say abandon the centre, however, they are more inclined to attack down these wide areas in this manner. So they don't have a problem building up slowly, but then if you get onto them and press high, and we know that City have done that a lot this season, they also do not have a problem using their outlets. And Semenyo is an amazing outlet in that sense, because he is so physical, he is so strong, he is so quick, and this season he has been a ridiculous goal threat as well. Absolutely obscene performances that he's been putting in for Bournemouth. Bournemouth have a lot of tools that City are not particularly good at dealing with. this season, our build-up we have struggled with. This season, we have struggled when teams have gone direct against us. This season, we have struggled when a team drops deep, builds up slowly, and then goes direct. We've struggled with a lot of these instances, so this is going to be a properly hard game for City. In the same way that the Villa game was really hard for City, this is going to be equally as difficult, I fear. The one saving grace is that it is at least at the Etihad rather than at Bournemouth's stadium. This was their side most recently in the Premier League, but probably do expect Evan Nilsson to come in at striker. Outside of that, this is probably going to be their main team. They do press in this out of possession at 4-2-3-1, only really committing one striker to the forward press for the most part this season. Now, Manchester City. So that's Bournemouth. How can that help our squad building, and what's going to be my prediction for what Guardiola will do? Because ultimately, even though I try to assess what I think could happen, it's more so what I think Pep's mindset may or may not be. And no one can really get into the mindset of that bold fraud. So, City. This was the team against Villa, so immediately this has to change massively because Nico wasn't able to start, so Nico will obviously be starting. Donnarumma's in goal because obviously he is. I'm going to predict the exact same back two. Actually, no, I tell a massive lie there. I'm going to predict the back two, the two centre-backs, that City have been using for the vast majority of this season. In a game like this, where they are going to be massively onto Donnarumma, if City try to build up with Donnarumma, trying to play out from the back like that, then first of all, I don't think we're going to have a good time because of how good Bournemouth's press is. But secondly, it is absolutely mandatory that Guardiola starts because he is arguably our most useful build-up asset in that sense. We have to have him there 100%. There is no question about it, especially because Bournemouth are likely going to force Donnarumma onto his weaker left foot. That would make sense. Nunes, I think, probably has to start because Kusanov has only just come back from injury, and he looked very rusty against Swansea. I do not know if this is the game where we want to be giving Kusanov his first start after his injury. I would be a bit concerned if we did do that. So I think that by definition, Nunes is going to have to start. So he's going to have a big task up against Semenyo. That is probably going to be the biggest battleground between the two. Nunes, thankfully, is quite physical and is very quick as well. Not as quick as Semenyo, however, he can still use that athleticism to get back and hopefully cover Semenyo. So Nunes, I think, is a fine option there. Aït-Nouri did start against Swansea, like Kusanov, looked rusty, so I'm going to pump for O'Reilly here, and it makes sense I think it would make sense to start O'Reilly even if Aït-Nouri were fully fit. In an ideal world, we are going to want our tallest fullbacks on the pitch, and O'Reilly is a tall lad and is good in the air, so it makes sense to do that. So he's going to be dealing probably with Tavernier again. We need to watch out for those direct balls to the wings against City. Nico has to start. Rodri is still not able to start. Pep alluded to the idea that he would potentially be on the bench, but it's still too early for him, and Nico has been putting in some really good performances. So I think this is going to be the back four and defensive midfielder that we go for. It's not ideal given how fantastic Bournemouth have been out of possession and have been forcing high turnovers and errors. A lot of these players, I would argue, do not have a particularly good first touch and are not particularly incredibly useful assets in build-up, but it is the state of play that City are in right now where we can't really consider any other options. So that is just something that I think we have to deal with, and that's going to influence how I believe we probably should set up when we are attacking Bournemouth also. So Nico starts, of course he does. Foden also has to start, whereas Foden, there he is, because he's been one of our best players this season. He's also good. If we are struggling in build-up, we know that Foden can do what he did against Everton and what he's done for a lot this season, where he does drop deep in that more box-to-box role, which I would like to see again. Now, there will be lots of calls for Cherki to start, given his really impressive performance against Swansea. I do not believe that this is the game to start Cherki personally, and Guardiola has alluded to that himself in his comments. So even though I am trying to predict what Guardiola would do, even if it were up to me, I probably still wouldn't play Cherki in the centre given the degree of the opponent that we are going to face, and also in light of Guardiola's comments where he essentially said that sure, for some games Foden and Cherki can play together, but maybe not for many or all of them. Long term, they absolutely must get into the same starting 11. However, it's Shirky's first season, so maybe short term it can be a thing. So I'm not going to predict Shirky to start based on that fact of how good Bournemouth are off ball and how Shirky against the only good opponent he's played against and started against rather was Spurs. He played in central midfielder. He's played in central midfield that day, and he clearly didn't understand his out of possession role. Makes sense. It was his first Premier League start, but I don't think it's the right game to introduce him into it. Reinders, I think, is probably going to be that player that I'm going to predict. Part of me does want to predict Bernardo, but I am going to predict Reinders because he was given a full rest against Swansea. I could see a world where Pep actually plays Bernardo in midfield instead, but I am going to predict Reinders. The wings, I think, is the most contentious area and the one that's most up for debate because City actually sort of have some options right now. Marmoush started against Swansea. I felt he struggled overall, but he did really well for the goal. Doku is, of course, an option. Bob is an option. Savio is an option. Technically, Shirky would be an option from that right side, but it doesn't look like Pep's going to bite at that idea, which is a shame because I think that would be a really good idea to get Shirky into the side, right wing off ball, centrally on ball. But hey, Pep doesn't want to seem to go for it. That's a shame, I think. I am going to have Savio here. I'm not going to have Bob. And Bob started the past 2 games, and I do feel that he has struggled on an individual level. There's also no doubt that we haven't been helping him enough, but just fundamentally on an individual level, he has been struggling a little bit. So I think it's absolutely fine to take him out of the side, certainly against a physical side like Bournemouth, certainly given the context I spoke about earlier, how strong Bournemouth's left is. Even though Savio himself is not this really strong player, of course, he is still a player who will absolutely track back and is one of City's best off-ball workers. He does need to improve on his decision-making, and Bob is also a fantastic worker off-ball, but Savio is just that little bit quicker, so I wonder if that could be a factor, because if like Semenyo is holding up the ball here, and Nunes is on him, and Truffaut is up here, what will happen is, even though Truffaut isn't this marauding left-back, when he gets to those sorts of areas of the pitch, he is liable to overlap and provide that support with Semenyo as that decoy, in which case we will need our right winger to track the run of Truffaut, and I think that Savio could be a decent option there by virtue of his pace. So it's not necessarily about work rate, because Bob has exceptional work rate and is a wonderful presser. It's more about the pace factor. And then the on ball as well. I just think that from that right side, that is Savio's best position. And I just believe that Savio from the right wing is overall going to give us more than Bob from the right wing, because you guys know I don't think Bob's actually a pure right winger, whereas Savio is. The other reason why I would pick Savio, and the reason why I'm actually, even though I think this is probably a stupid prediction, but I'm going to go for it anyway for vibes. Yeah, I want to have some fun. This, I think, could become I'm not going to say basketball game, but certainly a game which has the possibility, the potential to become expansive and open for both sets of teams. Based on the issue I spoke about earlier with the press, it would be better to play Doku here, because City are down a man in the centre of build-up, so we often have to go wide, in which case it normally ends up with our fullbacks. Our fullbacks are playing it to our wide players, and because we're playing fullbacks who don't have the best first touch, often our wingers are not receiving it in optimal positions, or even if they are, they're getting pressed out of their arse by an opponent. So the ball might come into here from O'Reilly to Marmoush, but then Jimenez will be right on him. Now, Doku has illustrated that he's been a fantastic outlet option in that sense, because he is so strong himself and he can hold off the opponent. So if you want to view the game like that, and how you think City will play, if you believe they will try to bypass the press through playing out from the back, then you should probably play Doku here. However, I'm going to predict that what City actually end up doing in the match is playing a bit more directly and a bit more aggressive and a bit more gung-ho, and trying to get in behind Bournemouth, who will leave a bit of space, because when they press high, there is obviously space in behind them to exploit. Doku and Bob are more ball-to-feet players. They are capable of running in behind, but they are far more comfortable with receiving the ball to feet and then short bursts of acceleration. Conversely, Marmoush and Savio are more so the opposite of that. They want to receive the ball in behind. They are runners, essentially. And of course, they can do the other side of the game to an extent, Savio in particular, maybe Marmoush less so. But ultimately, they are runners in behind. Pep has described these players as long pace players. I'm thinking that might be a better option. So from goal kicks, it might be an idea to pin Haaland on Jimenez. And that is how City can bypass the press. It is riskier. City will be more liable to lose the ball. But I do think that might be the better course of action for this game, given how we feel, how I think Bournemouth will be setting up. I think that might be a go-to strategy for City. So trying to exploit their high press just by bypassing it by going over it rather than trying to play through it. Knockdowns out wide are far less risky than knockdowns in the centre. We've seen Haaland do this before, where he pins himself on the right back usually, and then why can't Marmoush then make runs off him therein? So that is what I'm going to predict as for City's starting 11. I would love to predict Shirky to start this game because his long passing in particular would be really useful to Savio and Marmoush, and you know my thoughts on him partnering Foden. I think that is absolutely sensational, but I wonder if it's a game too soon for him, and particularly given the context of the opponent and how difficult they are as an opponent, maybe it's not sensible to predict Shirky. So I'm not going to predict him to start based on that, nor would I want him to start. I'm going to predict City to win because I like to predict City to win. This is going to be 1-0. Haaland gets the goal, of course he does, and Donnarumma with a clean sheet. That's what I'm going for, but get your score predictions in the comment section, and also give me your feedback on whether I should incorporate stills as I have done today in future tactical previews. Thank you so much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like on the video because it's free. If you want to go the extra mile, the best way to support me is to join the channel as a member. And shout out in particular to my beautiful highest tier channel members, Tony, Spartacus, Silver Splits the Blue, Ethan Larios, Austin King, and Rowan.